How was that the callback instruction?
I liked it. Yeah, it was more the traditional one that you've done. It's closer to that.
I think that's what we'll use going forward.
Like the other ones.
Yeah, that's why I've been thinking for a long time to bring it into the instructions for the guided meditation. But I hesitated because I thought it might be a little distracting. So, and I think we had a discussion on a Tuesday night.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it seemed like the consensus, and it was kind of what I was feeling. So.
Yeah, maybe the change was distracting.
Yeah.
This is more like the old way, so it's sort of like, okay, we're back.
Yeah, people are comfortable with that. Yeah. I think I'm going to continue more or less like this and just use it in the initial instructions, just to. The important point there is to bring it into the context of actually how the Buddha taught, and the point of meditation and acknowledging that while we're being mindful of the breath, fabrication's quiet. But it's interesting. I've never come across any guided meditation it's attributed to the Buddha. Just background instructions. Which leads me to be very mindful of keeping it as simple as possible. Because if there was any reason for a long elaboration, the Buddha certainly would have presented it and it would have been preserved.
I mean, it's interesting when you read the suttas, like if you read on the Paramitas Sutta or the Shamatha-Vipassana Sutta, it's hard to know whether those are, he specifically says you must be mindful of it. Mindfulness is bring mindfulness to the fore, and these are things to be mindful of. But then you think, okay, is that during meditation or is it always or both? It's not really clear. So when you bring it up during meditation, it seems like it's so appropriate to have an instruction like that during meditation.
Yeah, that's the importance of context. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha, the four foundations of mindfulness, breath in the body, mindful of feelings, etc. That's the direct teachings on what to do during meditation and what not to be distracted by feelings and thoughts. And then if you read it in the proper context, you realize that the Buddha is saying now from that well-concentrated state, off your cushion primarily, then you can hold in mind the broader framework of his Dhamma, meaning, and he concludes both of those, the Anapanasati Sutta too, with ultimately being mindful of the 7 factors of awakening and the 4 noble truths, and along the way to incorporate things such as the 5 clinging aggregates or the other instructions that he gives, but not to develop a contemplation practice about those, to use your concentration. And the reference to that instruction is in the Samadhi Sutta and the Yuganada Sutta, and there's a few other ones. And then when you truly understand the Buddha's teachings on the jhanas, and I'm saying truly because those are so misunderstood, that the Buddha is simply describing ordinary mind states that are developed through this extraordinary teaching. But it's nothing to be striving for. So everything rests in that 4 foundations of mindfulness. Mm-hmm. When you read other suttas, even how the Buddha is teaching how to incorporate the Eightfold Path, then you can truly understand that the Buddha's teachings on concentration and mindfulness, which are very specific. We develop concentration. We use meditation primarily for deepening concentration so that we can support the refined mindfulness that then allows us to integrate the entire Eightfold Path. And then that becomes, and I think you've experienced this. In fact, you talked very eloquently about it, Kevin. Then the Eightfold Path truly becomes an expression of your moment-by-moment life. That's the ultimate expression of refined mindfulness. But it all begins with a concentration practice. So this sutta, it's not even called a sutta. The teachings on the Paramitas are similar to last week in the teachings on the precept, is in that they're guidance for how to practice, but they're also these 10 Paramitas that the Buddha teaches are useful as benchmarks in our Dhamma practice. In other words, as we are able to express ourselves from these 10 qualities of mind, Paramitas means great perfections of mind, we know that we're developing the Eightfold Path, the Buddhist teachings, as intended. They also get, like the precepts, they also get to very, very subtle levels of experience that we can only have as we develop the Dhamma. So, and even the setting for this is Sariputta. We know from the last few talks on Sariputta and Moggallana, Sariputta, once he came to the Buddha, very quickly developed an awakened state, full human maturity. But even the question he puts to the Buddha is related to, okay, now that I have this awakened quality of mind, how do I describe it? In other words, he's almost asking, like, how do I describe this awakened quality of mind? And the Buddha's response is very interesting. Sariputta questioned the Buddha one day, how many qualities are there to be developed in the Dhamma or in your Dhamma? The Buddha responded, there are 10 qualities developed in the Dhamma. And what are these 10? And he begins with giving or dana, generosity, giving, virtue, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity are the qualities developed in the Dhamma. So again, as we know, the Buddha never wasted any words, and he taught very specific. If there was more embellishments needed to these, he would have included them here. We can be sure of that when you read the Buddha's teachings, you understand that. So that's the end of the Buddha's words. The first one, giving or dana, is the first perfection, and it really does incorporate all the other perfections. In fact, you could say that all of the 10 perfections, the 10 paramitas, are all aspects of awakened right view. In other words, once we have developed that profound right view, as the Buddha describes right view as understanding at a profound level, the nature of stress and having abandoned all craving and clinging rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, we are naturally expressing these 10 qualities of mind constantly. That dana, or giving, is it's rooted in practical giving. In other words, finding a need that someone has. Maybe they need a bowl of soup or an article of clothing. But that's a very preliminary aspect of giving. One of the reasons why I think the Buddha includes dana, or giving, first is because it's the antidote to clinging, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We cannot be truly generous if we're clinging to anything. And so this is where it gets to the very profound levels. And so most human beings are generous at some level. But the interesting thing about being mindful of dana is where do we as individuals stop? And one of the most profound aspects of dana, in fact, it is the most profound aspect of giving, of having a true generosity of spirit, is to be mindful and peaceful with whoever and whatever is in front of us. That's true generosity of spirit. So relating that to, and I was thinking about this earlier today, to the political climate, which is so extreme. There's so many people locked into these extreme views that are otherwise, for the most part, caring people. But yet when they're stuck in their position, when they're stuck in their view, they immediately stop that mindful, peaceful presence. That's withholding. That's clinging to a view. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's really...
saying my view is really the only view.
Yes, and even if you're an awakened human being, such as the Buddha, wouldn't know that you're holding an awakened right view. But that shouldn't cause you to isolate or ostracize someone else, because that is the essence of clinging and craving. It's the essence of a lack of generosity. And it's only an unawakened mind that can be threatened by other views, even if they're so contrary to what you know as an awakened human being is reality. And so even when the Buddha was always in, not always, but often in situations moderating between conflicts in the world. But he always took an awakened view, and he always allowed through his great generosity of mindful presence of other people's views. That's what leads to peace. So that's the first quality of mind. We know that we're not there yet if we're clinging to any views that create conflict in our minds or other people's minds. It doesn't, I can hear, and I'll probably get some questions about that. Does that mean that we become Pollyannish, that we let people step all over us? No, it doesn't. It means we take a position, but we also we take a position rooted in mindfulness as framed by the Eightfold Path, but we allow other people to be part of that, no matter what their views are. So moving on to the other perfections. Virtue and renunciation are really part of Dhamma when you see it that way. In other words, in order for me to be continually engaged in right speech, right action, and right livelihood, I must be holding a great generosity of spirit, or else it's going to affect my behavior, won't it? And the aspect of the Dhamma of renunciation is not so much renouncing our possessions or physical objects. It's being willing to recognize and renounce views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. When the Buddha talks about there's nothing sacrificed, nothing offered, that's really what he's talking about, is recognizing and abandoning our views rooted in ignorance. But if we're tenaciously clinging to those views through lack of generosity, even with our own mind states, we can never get there, can we? So you can see how these qualities of mind build on one another, but they're also, each quality is incorporated in the other qualities. Wisdom, energy, and patience. Having a quality of mind of wisdom is rooted in the understanding that I have recognized and abandoned ignorance. It's not like magic. It's not that there's no more ignorance present. In your mind, it isn't present, but you also understand that it's not present. As the Buddha teaches, it's just as important to be mindful of what's present as it is to be mindful of what's not present. That's the essence of understanding another person's suffering. Or we can get very callous if we only develop the Dhamma to the point of, look at how wonderful I've developed the Dhamma, and forget where we came from, which is a mind rooted in ignorance. And if we forget that, then we can't accept other people's minds that are rooted in ignorance. But if we develop the wisdom of a Buddha, we understand another person's behavior in their thought, word, and deeds, because we know that was once us. We were once there. Again, to bring it all the way back to true generosity. In order for us to be truly generous with our spirit, we must understand the previous nature of our own clinging and craving, our own stinginess of spirit. And how often do we act in that way that we will be generous? I'm saying this really the second time, but in a slightly different way, that in some ways we're very generous, but in other ways we're very stingy because of a judgment of the situation that we're in. Yeah, and so an awakened, fully mature human being will understand that process and no longer act in that way. Energy and patience, energy, patience, and determination are all aspects of right intention, but also right effort. Right effort teaches us to maintain our energy and our determination and our right resolve to continue with the Dhamma practice. On a practical level, it might be, well, I'm just a little too tired. I don't feel like meditating tonight. But we realize why we're doing it, for our own benefit towards awakening, or maybe coming to a class, or maybe reading some Dhamma-related material. Or maybe it's simply to act in a generous and loving way when we don't feel like it, when we're exhausted. To remember that it's even in this less than ideal physical and mental quality that Dhamma practice is so important, is most important there. Truthfulness and loving kindness, they're all aspects of the Eightfold Path, aren't they? And the moral and ethical aspects of the Eightfold Path. We're not engaging in right speech or right action or often right livelihood if we're not being truthful and being loving and kind towards others. It's just a simple framework for how we act. But so often, if we're being stingy with our understanding, we can't be loving and kind to everyone, can we? Or we might find and justify a level of dishonesty, even if we know it, because we'll say, well, the situation fits that. It's never appropriate. There may be situations where we can't be truthful, and it's best to just simply keep our mouths shut, which is what the Buddha often did. Oftentimes when questions were put to the Buddha and the question itself was rooted in ignorance, he would simply sit quietly. And the understanding was that the question itself doesn't deserve an answer. The question itself is rooted in ignorance. And the last quality that the Buddha teaches, equanimity, is how the Buddha describes the quality of mind of an awakened, fully mature human being. Their mind is always resting in equanimity. Our minds are always resting in equanimity, no matter what's occurring, because of our great and generous mindful presence, meaning we don't need anything else to be any different than it is. We don't need more of something or less of something. We're not stingy in our thinking. We're not narrow-minded in our thinking. Our minds are resting in equanimity. We're able to be at peace no matter what's occurring. And the instruction that I often give is to be at peace with less than peaceful mind states. This teaching of a quality of mind of equanimity is rooted in great generosity, but it also reflects the fourth foundation of mindfulness, to be mindful of the present quality of mind. And in the context that the Buddha taught that fourth foundation of mindfulness, we know that we are at peace with less than peaceful mind states. So one of the best examples of that, how does that happen? How does that work to an awakened human being? Is in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where the teachings on the last days of the Buddha, which takes place over about 90 days. It's hard to know exactly, but given the length and the occurrences within that sutta, it's probably over 3 months. Within that sutta, the Buddha becomes violently ill. He eats some bad pork. And the description of his illness and the quality of his mind is very stark, almost shocking, until you realize that, wait a minute, this is a human being. He's in a human body. He still suffers. And in his mind, he feels that suffering. But when you read that section of the sutta, you realize that he's at peace with a less than peaceful mind state and a less than peaceful body. He literally died of dysentery. There are probably not much worse ways to die. And he describes the suffering along with that. But the quality of his mind never changed. He was at peace with a less than peaceful situation. And that's a profound example of equanimity and a profound example of the fourth foundation of mindfulness, to be mindful and equanimous no matter what has occurred, no matter what, going back to the other two of the three foundations of mindfulness, no matter what feeling is arising and passing away, even if it's dysentery, even if it's incredible. I mean, food poisoning, I've had it. It's incredibly painful too. Yeah. It's arising and passing away. His thoughts around his illness, he recognized they were arising and passing away. But as an awakened, fully mature human being, he was able to maintain a mind of equanimity. In other words, it didn't need to be any different than what was occurring. It's such a great example. And this little, I hesitate to even call it a sutta, but this little exchange between the Buddha and Sariputta provides such great guidance for us, doesn't it? Because if we can be mindful of these qualities of mind, they're always a benchmark to how I'm doing in the present moment. So if I get caught up in the politics of today, or just in a situation at work or with my family, and I'm mindful of this, and it might be just am I being stingy with my mindful presence, or is my mind not equanimous right now? We know that we're outside of the Dhamma. What do we do at that point when we're in the trenches? It's always appropriate to take a step back and take a breath. Sometimes it's appropriate to leave the situation because it might have gotten so out of hand. All of that is appropriate. What's most important is to always strive for maintaining a calm and peaceful mind and that great generosity of spirit, that we can be present, be mindfully present with whoever is in front of us and whatever's occurring. So that's the next talk. Thank you for listening.
Simple, you know?
Yeah, like most of the Dhamma, it is pretty simple, isn't it? Yeah.
To be in it.
Yeah.
And it overlaps so much with the 7 factors of enlightenment too. Several of them are exactly the same.
Yeah. Yeah, and that relates to what you were saying before about the Satipatthana Sutta. So those are things to be mindful of that we can hold in mind from a well-concentrated mind by using proper meditation practice. And these are the same things. And that's not to say we shouldn't think about them during meditation. But even at that point, we recognize that we're caught up in our thoughts, even if it's something Dhamma related, and remember that during meditation, I'm here to deepen concentration by being mindful of my breath. And, when you think about the setting of the original Sangha and even well-focused monasteries today, you didn't meditate 14 or 16 hours a day every day, for your whole life. That wasn't part of that life, and it certainly shouldn't be part of a monastic life today. You did meditate, and you meditated for reasonable amounts of time. And because of the mostly peaceful environment that you've have placed yourself in, you are able to think about these other things and consider them. Yes. But we can do the same thing, even those of us that are living out in the world. We can take the time. We can turn the computer off or turn the TV off or whatever, and just spend some time, maybe right after meditation, to think about these qualities of mind, the 7 factors of awakening, the 10 Paramitas, to consider what is it like to have the personal experience of suffering known as the 5 clinging aggregates. So we take it, we're using our life off our cushion in an appropriate way. And we're not just devoting, say, a 15-minute meditation and once a week coming to class practice. Yeah. It becomes more and more of our daily life. That comes back to Dhamma. Am I going to be stingy in relation to my Dhamma practice and my developing understanding because of my clinging to worldly events? Or am I going to start creating generosity towards myself and others by putting the time in to develop these teachings? So, part of the practice. Any other questions or comments tonight?
One, it's a little bit off topic, but it's about Dhamma and about teaching. I was thinking about it. I'm reading a book. It's more of a psychology book, but it's written by a Buddhist. It's Radical Acceptance, I think it's called, by a woman who's a psychologist who lived in an ashram for many years as she was finishing her psychological studies. And I think she's involved, with big names who were in the Insight Meditation Center or something.
What's her name?
I can't think of her name all of a sudden. Goodness. I can't think of it. Anyway, well, the thing is, it's interesting, and it makes me appreciate how much I really like how you teach this. In the book, she gives a synopsis of Buddha's life and his, in the kingdom and being rich and being protected by his father, and then going out into the world and then eventual enlightenment. When she talks about going out in the world, he says that, his father cleaned up the streets and everything. He wanted to make sure when he went out of the compound that everything looked really swell too. Yeah. And then she says, and it kind of throws me, she says, but the gods put a sick man in front of him and a corpse in front of him. Yeah. And, I just, I take exception to that. I just think, therefore, there are gods above Buddha who are putting things in front of him to make him think this way or something like that, And I don't really like that concept, but maybe I'm in my views that way too, and I'm stuck in my views. But it's not what, I don't think it's what the Buddha taught. No. Eventually, he didn't say the gods put these in front of me. He said, I saw a corpse and I saw a sick person, which in India in those times and today is very easy to come across.
It's the most common thing in the world.
So just wanted to, I don't know, that point, it's to me, it's not a fine point. It's a huge like a shift in the way you think about it. And it makes me question the book in a way, because I think, okay, this is a different way of thinking about the Dhamma that I'm not used to, but I can accept it. It's really a psychology book to me too, because she talks about how she uses these things in therapy as well. So
Yeah.
I'll think of her name, or I'll email it to you. Well, I have the book on my dining room table, so I'll just look at that.
Yeah, that is, yeah, we accept all of that because it's what occurs. It's more common to think that way in modern Buddhism than not. But to me, that it diminishes and I think is denigrating to an awakened human being. It's saying he couldn't have done it on his own.
Yeah.
He continually declared that he was a rightly self-awakened one. This is how he described himself. And he said that that's how others become that way. So when you're reliant on a god or gods for even the Buddha's awakening to put common occurrences in his path, then you become reliant on that God and not on the Dhamma anymore. And that's the problem. And the Buddha, again, you have to read the Buddha's words in the proper context. But he never says anything like that. He never says to do anything to appeal to anything outside of yourself. He talks about, he developed this understanding rightly within himself, and he taught other people to do that. So it's good to recognize that. And it also, on a very subtle level, it allows for not developing the Dhamma the way it was intended, but to take license with this or that, things that we don't like to do maybe, because there's a God that's taking care of us. It's not really up to me, is it? And that's something that always confused me, because most of modern Buddhism was presented that way to me. There was certain things that I had to do. In the Zen schools, most of it was just a lot of meditation. And it's even, I'm greatly simplifying it, but if you meditate long enough, hard enough, eventually you'll have this great burst of insight and you'll be awakened. And the implication is that insight is kind of just waiting for you either within your own nature or it's going to be bestowed on you. Well, again, the Buddha never taught anything like that. Or that you'll do enough rites and rituals over a long enough period of time that you'll be granted awakening. Again, that's not something the Buddha taught. He taught a very simple and practical way of human beings to develop that mind of equanimity right here, right now. This is a good example, but if you go through any of the important teachings, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Satipatthana, Anapanasati Sutta, dependent, the Paticca-Samuppada, all of those, and all the other ones that I teach, you'll never find one reference where the Buddha's teaching to appease or appeal to a God or something outside of yourself. And again, even to make that assumption, even that you have to that the author had to take to say that the God or gods put a dead person, a sick person, all the rest of the things in his place. It does even that type of thinking doesn't make much sense to me, because it is just a common occurrence.
It wouldn't have to be. Yeah, it's just like
there
and here, even in India now.
Oh yeah.
And other parts of the world, in the third world, it's chaos, and
there's some back alleys in New York City that you can see, really. Yeah. And so there's nothing extraordinary or godlike in any of that. And as we're talking, it points again to the practicality of the Buddhist teachings, not the mythical aspects of it. He walked out into the world and saw the conditions. It relates directly to his description of his own awakening in the Nagara Sutta or in the Loka Sutta, which was given right after his awakening, when he says, I looked out on the world and I saw the world aflame with passion. Well, that's not something that was bestowed on him. It was from his own understanding of the conditions of the world. It relates just to this. So it's good to recognize those things too. And of course, this author and the Insight Meditation Society, they can believe whatever they want to believe, and it's just important to recognize that the Buddha taught something different. And that really, if I would say I have an issue with the aforementioned or other schools, is that they're not clear about that. They claim that this is what the Buddha taught, either from ignorance or a lack of forthrightness. Because the reason why I said that, if I could see it, I think anybody could see it. I don't claim any special power. So once I started actually studying what the Buddha actually taught, it became obvious to me what he taught and what he didn't teach. Thank you for bringing that up, Kevin. Boy, it's a good class.
Yes.
I was thinking, I thought I had some kind of general announcement, but I don't.
We did talk about the retreat.
Oh, I'll make a decision on the retreat
Yeah.
by Saturday or Sunday and make an announcement. We'll see what happens. If not this one, we have one scheduled for next May too, and we'll certainly have that one. There's a lot of things that seem to have taken place. There's a wedding for some of our core group. It's a little bit earlier than usual, and so some of our Sangha members are teachers, and that's just too early in the school year to take 2 days off. And then a few people just had like.
So funny when you say that. Well, not funny. Teachers convention weekend happens to always be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it's the first weekend in November. So that, and the weather gets a little, well, it's not really that late, but that is something that a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
They have for days.
Yeah, we have been having them either the second or the third weekend in October, which seems to work well for everyone. This is just a little bit early. There's a few folks that are just, they're already traveling that time. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind a small retreat. I wouldn't mind a big retreat, but we'll see I'll make the decision and send an announcement out early next week. So, great. Thank you, Kevin. Let's finish with metta, as we always do. So, again, find your relaxed meditation posture. Gently close your eyes and gently close your mouth and take a few moments to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you for a wonderful class. Peace.
Yeah.